Hi, I'm Caroline. Thank you for joining me today for this yoga session. You might be joining live, you might be watching the recording, and it's lovely to have you sharing this practice with me. And I thought I'd take a moment today just describing what yoga is, because we often have preconceptions if we haven't practiced yoga before, and sometimes we've practiced different forms of yoga or different types of yoga. So to begin with, I thought I'd start with the word yoga. It's actually a Sanskrit word, and Sanskrit is an ancient Indian language we use a lot in yoga. A lot of the old texts around yoga and how we found out about yoga have been written in Sanskrit or were written in Sanskrit thousands of years ago. And the word translates as union or to yoke. And I like to interpret that as connection. So for me, yoga is about connection. So in everyday life, that might be a connection with a friend, a work colleague, family member, connection with a pet. So thinking about connections in your world, your life, and knowing that we're all interconnected as human beings. In a yoga practice, I like to think of it as a connection with the breath and the body. So it's open to interpretation, as is everything in yoga. But for me, it's about making my breath work with my body, listening to my body, and thinking about what would best serve it. So this is what I'd like to invite you to do today, listening to your body. So for some of us, we might just want to come and lie down into a relaxation shape Shavasana, and that's great. For some of us, we may want to take some slightly stronger versions of the yoga shapes we come into. For some of us, the breathing might be challenging, and actually just consciously breathing will be enough. So listening, if you can today, to your body in any way you can. And this is called interoception. It's a lovely word, interoception. And so finding the form or the shape that works for you. And as we come through the physical yoga practice, I will try and give lots of different options for all levels. And levels meaning where you're at today on this mat. So the days when my yoga practice is 5 minutes of breathing or 10 minutes of lying flat on the floor and relaxation. And that is a yoga practice. And something else, a wonderful yoga teacher had once said to me, Ali, he had said to me, if you're not smiling, you're not practicing yoga. So please do feel free to smile, even laugh at yourself or laugh at me if you would like to. And just enjoy your practice as much as you can, making sure you feel it feels good for you. I will try and use a little bit of Sanskrit so you can get a little taste of some of the Indian words that we use in yoga, but I'll mainly use the English language. So to begin with, maybe you have a yoga mat. Lovely if you do. No need if you don't. So you can practice on the floor, ideally on carpet, so it's a little bit softer under the knees, or maybe you've got a rug where you are. I've also got a cushion, so I've got my mat set up. I've got a cushion there, quite a puffy cushion, feels quite thick and comfy. And I've also got a blanket, folded at the other end of the mat. So my camera's it's just going to refocus. And I've got a blanket there just because I like a little bit of comfort. So that I can use for my knees or my elbows as we come to lying down. So taking your time to create your space. And you want a little bit of space around you, just so you know you can almost spread out. And we might bring the knees from side to side towards the end of our practice together. And we'll begin today lying down. So if that feels okay for you, coming to a lying down position, lying down on the floor and finding a comfortable shape here. So this might be, we call this shape semi-supine, knees bent. Hands can maybe rest on the belly or down by the sides of your body. Or perhaps you'd prefer to come into a more supportive lying flat position. We call this Shavasana in yoga. So to begin with, finding the shape here that feels good for you. Some days it'll be different to others. You may like to tuck your chin a little, so having a sense that the centre of the back of your head is in contact with the floor. And taking a little bit of time here to allow yourself to settle. Maybe that means encouraging your shoulders to drop down towards the earth. Perhaps your eyes close. You're welcome just to soften your gaze. And feeling into your jaw. If there's any tightness around your jaw, you might like to soften your jaw. You can take a really big wide yawn, pretend yawn, stretching through your jaw. And maybe even encourage your tongue to rest in the lower part of your mouth. And depending on when you practice yoga, we have a little bit of time just to settle, to leave whatever we have been doing during our day kind of off the mat, we say, coming into the present to practice a little yoga. Maybe you begin to notice your body melting into the floor a little more, softening. There's a beautiful word, Sanskrit word, which is ahimsa, and it translates as compassion, kindness. So you might like to keep that in mind today as you come through this class. Coming through and practicing yoga with kindness and compassion towards yourself. And I always like to remind everyone that comes to my classes that I'm a guide. So sometimes I'm called a yoga teacher, but I like to think of myself as a guide. So if anything doesn't feel right and I'm instructing a particular way or form, if it doesn't feel comfortable for you, coming out and coming back to a lying down position, a lying down shape that feels good for you. If it feels possible today, breathing in and out through your nose. Perhaps you can hear your breath, and maybe you can feel your breath. Maybe bringing your awareness to the parts of your body that move as you inhale. So that might be the area around your rib cage. Perhaps you can feel your belly rising and falling. You may even notice some movement around your collarbones or shoulders. And perhaps you begin to notice areas of tension or tightness, often shoulders if you've been working at a desk or using a phone or computer. And also areas in your body that feel soft and at ease. And bringing your awareness to these different areas can help us as we come through our physical yoga practice. Being mindful to be gentle with the areas of tightness and tension. And sometimes it can help to visualize as you breathe in, directing your breath towards these areas. Almost a sense of your breath softening and relaxing these tighter areas in your body. And maybe you begin to notice your breath has slowed down a little or softened. And if you would like to join me, we're going to take 2 or 3 breaths, ha breaths. And this is simply breathing in through your nose, if that feels possible. And then breathing out through your mouth, making a ha sound. So when you're ready and in your own time, if you would like to try the ha breathing, breathing in through your nose. And breathing out through your mouth. Taking 2 or 3 more rounds if that feels good for you. And when you come back to breathing normally for you, noticing once again if anything's changed. So there's no right or wrong way to breathe. There are efficient ways to breathe. And the ha breathing is a way of making our exhalation a little bit longer. So as we breathe out and that becomes a little longer, it's a really useful tool for gently and softly calming our bodies down. And that's by calming the nervous system down, our nervous systems. So if it was a breathing technique that felt helpful or useful, that's a particularly good one to take away. And if your eyes are closed, you may like to begin to open your eyes. And in your own time, gently drawing your right knee in towards your chest. So I call this a knee hug. It could be a really soft, gentle knee hug, or perhaps you begin to draw your right knee in a little closer towards your rib cage. Giving yourself an opportunity to feel into how your right hip is doing today. Often if we've been active, running, cycling, walking, or sitting even, our hips can get a little tight. So it feels a little strong. You can allow the knee to come away from your rib cage, or even drop the foot back down towards the floor. And you may also like to bring some movement to your foot. So your right foot, a few options to maybe circle your ankles. Perhaps you begin to point and flex your right foot. You may also like to spread your toes wide. And when you're ready, releasing the right foot back down towards the floor and taking the shape on the other side. So in your own time, drawing your left knee in towards your rib cage. And you may find this side feels very different. So we have a habitual side, a side that we use more than the other, one side more than the other. A bit like us being left-handed and right-handed, we're likely to be using our right foot or our left foot a little more. It's not always the same as the hands. And so sometimes that means one side's a little tighter than the other. Maybe you feel you want to draw your left knee in towards your rib cage a little closer. And then perhaps you begin to move your left foot. So same options as the right side. You may like to bring some circles to your ankle, perhaps pointing and flexing your foot. Also an option to begin to spread your toes wide and slowly release. And in your own time, placing your left foot back down on the floor. And taking a moment here to have a sense that your feet feel parallel. So both feet grounded in contact with the floor beneath you. Toes pointing forwards. Making sure your lower back feels comfortable where it is. Option always to take the feet further away or perhaps draw the heels in a little closer towards your body. That can just change the feeling in your lower back. Welcome to stay here, or maybe you start to move your arms. So slowly floating your arms up and behind you. And slowly bring them back down, either to the sides of the body or to rest on your belly. Slow, gentle, mindful movement. The beautiful thing about yoga is there's no wrong or right way to practice yoga, a bit like breathing. And it's very much about what is helping, what's supporting, what feels good for you. And if you'd like to integrate your breath with this movement, you can maybe breathe in as you raise your arms, reaching behind you, and breathing out to float the hands and the arms back to your starting position. Elbows can remain softly bent, or perhaps you begin to straighten your arms and reach away a little further. So it's going to give you a stronger stretch, particularly in the back of your body. And as with everything we practice today, if you take the stronger option and it feels a little too strong, knowing you're welcome to step back a notch, just to edge off a little. Taking one more round in your own time. And allowing your hands to rest down on the floor beside you, palms facing down, so you feel you've got a little bit of support through your hands. Beginning to take your feet wider And then you may like to gently bring the knees from one side to the other. So I call this a windscreen wiper movement. Beginning to wake up our lower back. Taking one more on each side. And eventually finding your way or your knees back to center. And we're going to come into something called reverse pigeon. And this is where the outside of your right foot's going to come to the front of your left thigh. So taking a moment here, just feeling into this. If it feels too strong in the right hip, you may like to take your left foot a little further away. So it's going to just soften the stretch. If you feel you want something a little stronger, you could take your right hand and gently push the right leg away. So pushing on the inside of your right thigh. We're going to try avoid pushing the knee because our joints are quite precious. So gently pushing away on the inner thigh here. And maybe that feels good for you. And another option might be to encourage the left foot off the floor. Hands can stay grounded if that feels good. Perhaps you're familiar with this version with the hands coming to the back of the left thigh. And what we want to try to do wherever we have come to is allow our shoulders to soften towards the floor. So is it possible to soften your shoulders? And I know for me, having the hands on the floor beside me means my shoulders feel a little bit more relaxed. So finding the shape here that works for you. You're likely to be feeling this around the glutes, perhaps in the right hip. Sometimes I feel this all over. So as always, there's no wrong or right way to feel this. It's going to be unique to your body. And slowly in your own time, gently dropping the left foot. If you did raise it, unraveling the right foot. And you may like to extend your legs out, just giving your legs a little bit of a wiggle. And as with everything in yoga, we take one side and then we follow with the other. So foot or feet coming to the floor, finding your comfortable position here. And then when you're ready, bringing the outside of your left foot to the front of the right thigh. And if it feels too strong, option to take your right foot a little bit further away from your body. Or if you want something stronger, drawing the right heel a little closer towards your torso. You might like to place your left hand on the inside of your left thigh, gently pushing the left leg away a little. Or another possibility is drawing the right leg up. So it might just be a little, perhaps the big toe stays on the floor. Option to have the hands behind the right thigh. Perhaps the hands stay grounded. And if you get here and feel it's a little too strong, if the breath changes, if you feel like it's just a little harder to breathe, then edging off, coming back a step. Taking one more breath here. And slowly releasing the right foot back down towards the floor if you did raise it, and unraveling the legs, the feet. And an option here might be to bring both knees in for a hug. So drawing both knees in for a hug, and that just might be a little hug, maybe it's a big hug, both knees come into your rib cage. You might like to gently rock from side to side, taking some movement here that feels helpful for you. And when you're ready, rolling to one side and using your hands to help you come to sitting. And the reason I say that is just it means we're less jerky with the neck, so it's a little bit more kind for our bodies. And this is where you might like to have a cushion or a pillow folded over. So I'm going to begin to sit on my cushion and I'm going to come to cross-legged, and this might not be comfortable for you. So I'm going to just demonstrate here a few different options. So first option here is to cross the legs. This is called Sukhasana. It's supposed to be easy shape or easy form or pose. Not always easy if you've got tight hips. So that's one option. If I've got a little bit of height under my glutes, so I've got this pillow or this cushion, sometimes it's helpful for me to bring my knees towards the floor and it's almost like I'm rocking forwards on my cushion. Another option might be to come to kneeling, so that might be more comfortable for you, and you can still have a cushion underneath your glutes and any height. Even a couple of books, chunky books with a cushion on top, it's going to take any pressure off your knees and ankles. So a few options there. Really welcome to come to any seated position. If you'd prefer, you can come to sitting in a chair. So however you're sitting today, beginning to have a sense of grounding down through your sitting bones. So it's almost like gravity is pulling you down a little, grounding us towards the earth. But at the same time, we're lifting through the crown of our head. And sometimes I like to have my hand hover over my head so I can feel myself growing towards the hand. So we're looking for a lovely long spine if that feels possible. And finding tool length in any way you can. And then perhaps your shoulders can soften a little as well. So we're beginning to find some space here in the upper body. Our breath, our lungs come from about here to about here. And we want to create space here to have a lovely full deep breath. In your own time, you may like to slowly lean towards the right hand side, placing your right hand on the floor beside you. If you're on a chair, you can take the hand to the side of your chair. And then maybe you bring your left hand to your rib cage. So you're ready to feel your rib cage here, the bones. And this can be really helpful because we can begin to direct our breath. So our hand is our kind of composer or our conductor, I should say. It's leading our breath. Breathing in, feeling the breath reach our hand. So noticing how your breath feels here. Is it possible to begin to breathe towards your hand? And when you're ready, slowly coming through center and taking that on the other side. And as always, one side is going to feel a little softer, a little easier than the other. So bearing that in mind, once you find your shape on this side, perhaps you begin to bring your right hand to your rib cage, so helping to direct your breath into the right lung. And in your own time, coming back through center. We're going to take that one more time, but this time the arm or your arm might come over your head. So in your own time, slowly leaning towards your right hand side. Hand can come towards the floor if you're sitting on the floor. If you're seated in a chair, finding a placement for your hand on the side of your chair. And then maybe from here, your left arm reaches up and over. And I've got a really strong bend in my elbow. I've got a sore shoulder today, but maybe you begin to reach away a little further. So you can decide how strong you'd like to make this stretch. Trying to keep our sitting bones grounded. So if we're leaning up and over and this hip has come up, we just need to come back a little here. Being mindful of not collapsing the shoulder, coming to open up through our heart center. And if your arm gets tired or it just feels sore, the hand can rest on the hip. And when you're ready, slowly coming back through center, and we'll take that on the other side. So lots of options to come through. As you begin to lean towards the left hand side, maybe the hand comes up and over, soft bend. Maybe it becomes just a little straighter, reaching away, or perhaps the hand rests on your hip. And when you're ready, slowly coming back to our seated position here. And we're going to slowly take our time to come onto our hands and knees. So this is where you might like a little bit of padding for your knees. So I'm going to demonstrate my blanket. I love any creature comforts in yoga. That's the lovely thing about yoga. You can have as many props and creature comforts as you like. And we're looking for our knees to be about under our hips. So I say about, it's going to be really different for all of us. And it's about comfort, making sure you feel comfortable in the shape you've come to. And then hands are about under shoulders. And listening to your wrists. So if your wrists feel quite tight or sore today, there's a couple of options. You could make a soft fist. So I've just turned my fists and I've got my thumbs here on the floor, just as a gentle kind of grounding measure there. Or you might have something you can place under your fingers. So I'm rolling the end of my yoga mat here, and having my fingers on a little bit of height under the mat is going to take a little bit of pressure off my wrists. And that could be a blanket, a pillow, something else that you have nearby. So taking your time to find your happy shape, making sure you feel comfortable where you are. If you have got your hands spread on the floor beneath you, just trying to begin to spread your fingers. And if you know you're very flexible, so maybe you're hypermobile or you're just very, very bendy, you can turn the hands in a little. So that's going to look a little like that. It's just going to help stabilize your shoulder, keep your shoulders safe. So from here, we're going to begin to come into cat and cow. So the Sanskrit for that, Vithalasana and Kumarasana, some great names. So this is where we drop our bellies and take our gaze forwards. And then begin to gently curl the spine round and tap the chin a little. So this is making the shape of a cat, either a scared cat or an angry cat. So not a very peaceful idea, but we're looking at a kind of cartoon shape of a cat. And then as we drop our bellies, we're coming into cows. And I like to imagine the sacred cows that wander the streets of India. They've got those lovely bellies and they just gently drop down. So in your own time, gently flowing between the two. So it's almost like a wave-like motion. At any point, if this feels uncomfortable or doesn't feel right for you, coming to a resting shape. And if you're familiar with this movement and you would like to integrate your breath, we're breathing in to look forwards and dropping our bellies into cow. And breathing out to curl the spine round. Maybe the gaze moves towards the knees, into cat. But the main thing here is to make sure you're breathing. So often if we're concentrating, particularly on a new movement, we sometimes find ourselves catching our breath. So if you feel that you're not quite breathing fully, slowly, is there something you can do? Can you soften the shape? Begin to almost mentally say, inhale, exhale, as a reminder. Taking one more round here, maybe it's become a little deeper, a little stronger, perhaps it's just a really soft, gentle movement. And eventually coming back to our box or tabletop position, and we're going to gently release through our hands. So you may like to just sit back on your heels if that feels possible. If that feels too strong, if you have your cushion or pillow underneath, just or in between the knees, that can feel really comfy. And we'll take a moment to roll our wrists here. So you can have as much padding underneath your shins, your feet, and as much padding just tucked in here between the knees. I love lots of props, probably work that out. And then beginning to walk the hands forwards as we come into a version of child, so Balasana. So this is often known as child's pose or child's form. Perhaps your elbows are able to drop to the floor. And we're keeping our gaze low, so we're looking towards the floor, and you may have the mobility here to allow your forehead to rest on the floor. Another option might be to have a couple of extra pillows here to place under your forehead so it feels more restful. If you would like a stronger version of this shape, you can have your big toes touching, knees wide apart, and slowly begin to walk your hands and your fingers away. So it becomes a little bit more active, a little stronger. Only if that feels right for you today where you are on your mat. Taking one more breath here. And in your own time, finding your way slowly back to our tabletop box position. So we're going to come into a lunge. So really welcome, always, as always, to come to a resting shape if that's what you feel you need at this point today. Or maybe you come into a lunge shape, bringing your right foot forwards. And what we're looking for here is for the right knee to be above the right ankle. I'm just saying that in particular. Everything else doesn't matter as much, but we want that to keep our right knee safe. So alignment in yoga is very much about your body and how it feels for you. But for some particular joints, we want to try and keep the joints really safe. So that's the only point of reference or note that I'll make here. You're maybe feeling this in the right hip or glute. And if the fingertips don't quite reach the earth, maybe you have a couple of cushions or a couple of books you can have either side, and you can bring the floor to you. So that can be really helpful. It just takes everything a little easier. It's a bit softer. If you feel you want a slightly stronger stretch, maybe you tuck your left toes and very gently take the left knee back a little further, and that's going to deepen your stretch, deepen the sensation. Welcome to stay here, or maybe you begin to rise up. Hands could come to hips. Or maybe you begin to reach up. And there's two options here. Again, maybe you begin to reach your fingertips towards the sky, or perhaps you come into cactus arms, elbows bent. So whatever feels best for your shoulders if you have come up. And slowly, when you're ready, we're folding forwards again. And taking your time here to come back to our tabletop position. So we're using that as our kind of starting point. You may like to take your hips from side to side. Sometimes it can feel really lovely to bring some circling motions to the hips. Taking any movement here that feels good for you. And if you are going to take the lunge shape on the other side, slowly finding stillness. Welcome to come to rest in our child's shape or form, or lie on your back and find rest there. You might like to gently encourage your left foot forward, so coming into the lunge shape on the other side. So once again, the only point of reference here really is to have the left knee above the left ankle, just keeping our knees safe. Using any height you'd like to have under the hands, bringing the floor, the earth towards you. And then maybe this feels relatively soft, you'd like a slightly stronger sensation. So opportunity here to tuck your right toes and gently lift the right knee and take it back a little further. So that's going to strengthen the lunge a little more. Taking one more breath here. And then maybe you begin to rise up. So your hands can come to rest on your hips. You might like to float the arms up towards the sky. And the other option is your cactus arms as well. So few options there. Coming out at any point, so knowing that this is not about who holds it the longest or trying to hold it for a long time. It's very much about listening to your body, feeling once it's had enough, and slowly folding forwards. From here we're coming back to our tabletop shape. And welcome here to come to bring a little bit of movement to your shoulders, your hips, or perhaps you begin to sit back and find a child's pose or child's form that feels good for you. Taking any support you need to under knees, behind knees. And in your own time, finding your way to lying on your belly. So we're coming to find a flat form here. And gently, if this feels good for you, coming into a sphinx shape. So sphinx pose or sphinx form. And this is where the elbows, my elbows are a bit further forward. We're looking for the elbows to be roughly underneath the shoulders. So a line here. And once you come to this shape, feet, legs very relaxed, soft, just resting on the floor behind you. Take a moment to notice how your lower back feels. How does this feel for you? If it feels a bit too strong, if you've been sitting quite a long time, or you know you sometimes get back pain, you may like to take your elbows a little further forwards. And that's going to soften this back bend. So it's a back bend, this shape here. So if that feels better, maybe staying there. So taking a little bit of time to find this shape here. And our forearms are almost parallel. Hands can be grounding down, fingers, tips in connection with the floor, the earth. You might like to lift your heart a little. So cobra, named after the snake even. The Sanskrit name, I can't get my words out today. My Sanskrit name for cobra is Bhujangasana, so it's got quite a lovely name. And if you imagine a cobra, they've got a beautiful kind of lift to their rib cage as they look around. So that's what we're trying to mimic here. It's almost like we're beginning to create a little bit more space, if we can, for our breath. You might like to take one more breath here. And very slowly come to resting on the floor. So any shape that feels, again, good for you. You might like to take your hands one on top of each other to make a little pillow, and then rest your forehead down. And this is a very soft version of something called Mukha, crocodile. might like to tune into your breath again. Noticing where your breath is moving to, where you can feel your breath. And welcome to stay here in this version of crocodile shape. Or maybe you begin to come back into cobra. So finding your forearms roughly parallel. Maybe it's helpful to imagine the snake. And another option might be to come into a twist as well. So this is where we begin to lift the right elbow off the floor. It's almost coming to straight the right arm. And as you straighten your right arm, just almost keeping a very small bend in the right elbow, looking towards your right hand side. If your head, your neck feels happy, you might like to take your gaze over your right shoulder. So a little bit of a twist here. When you're ready, gently dropping your right elbow back down. And when you're ready, moving to the other side. So this is when the left arm is going to begin to straighten. So the left elbow, gently straightening. So micro bend there. So it's not coming to lock, it's just a very soft bend. And as you begin to turn towards your left hand side, you might like to take your gaze over your left shoulder. So always the option to just edge off a little. You can choose to soften this, take a step back. And in your own time, gently dropping your left elbow, coming back through center. And you may like to gently push back and come into a version of child shape again. So if this does not work for you, if you've done it a couple of times, it just doesn't feel comfortable, you're welcome to come to lie on your back and gently hug your knees in. So it's a very similar shape, just an upside down version. So that might feel more comfortable for you. In your own time, slowly finding your way back to a seated position. I'm just going to move my blanket out the way here. And before we come into relaxation, you might like to come into downward dog. So if you have had enough today, this is enough yoga for you, you'd like to come into relaxation now, really welcome to come to lying on your back or lying on your side, finding a comfortable shape. Or perhaps you begin to move into a downward facing dog. So our hands are a little bit wider, so maybe about shoulder width apart, feet about hip distance apart, and we begin to make a triangle shape. So the top of our thigh bone is the highest point of our triangle. So when you're ready, tucking your toes and coming into, it's Adho Mukha Savanasana. It's got an amazing name, downward dog. And what we want to do here is try and lengthen through the back of our body. So feel into your back. Is it possible to gently push into the hands and find length? Maybe you tuck your chin a little, and you'll notice my knees are bent. So I often say our legs get in the way in this shape. Legs always get in the way in downward dog. So we want to find lots of lovely, beautiful length and space in our backs if that feels possible. And then maybe you begin to just pedal and gently move the feet. So bending into one knee and then into the other.
So this can feel quite strong in the back of the hamstrings. So if your hamstrings are screaming at you today, sometimes they can get very tight. It's almost like they're speaking very loudly. You may like to keep your knees bent and find length. Coming out, dropping down to knees, resting at any point you need to. Another option might be to gently shake your head yes and no, checking that your head, your neck feel soft. If you're still in downward facing dog, eventually finding your way back down towards your mat. And you may like to take a moment to release through your wrists. And in your own time, finding a shape that feels comfortable for relaxation. So you may like to have a blanket to cover yourself in, keep warm, making sure you feel warm. We're going to be there for 2 or 3 minutes. You may like to have a pillow under your head, ideally nothing too thick, either a thin blanket folded or one of these very thin cushions or pillows. And traditionally, we often come into Shavasana, so lying with our palms facing the sky, but this sometimes doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't feel right. So a couple of other options is to come back here to our shape we began with. Maybe the hands come towards your belly. Another option might be to have your legs up the wall or on a chair, and I'm just going to very briefly demonstrate here because it's a lovely one to come into at the end of a day. So if you're coming to the wall, you come side on and you begin to lie down, and it's a bit of a magic movement, I call this, but you have to swing your legs up and somehow maneuver yourself slowly, and your legs have the wall to support them. So that's another option as well. If you had a chair, you would be able to lie down and rest your legs on the chair. Perhaps you just would like to curl up to one side. Main thing here is to make sure you are warm. So as you begin to find your shape that you feel comfortable in for relaxation, beginning to feel into the contact with each part of your body and the ground beneath it. So noticing the contact you have. Adjusting anything you feel you need to, taking this moment to settle. Make sure you feel comfortable. And perhaps you can encourage your shoulders to soften a little. You may like to encourage your tongue to rest in the lower part of your jaw. Feeling into your breath if that feels possible. You might like to use your breath as an anchor, so we can use our breath to help us focus. So if your mind wanders, knowing that's okay, it naturally will. But perhaps you encourage your mind to take a step back and refocus on your breath. Noticing the sensations of your breath, perhaps the cooler air as you breathe in and the warmer air as you breathe out. Or another option might be to focus on your rib cage or your belly moving with your inhalation and exhalation. Welcome to keep your eyes open or perhaps close your eyes. And if it's helpful, with each inhalation, maybe visualizing that breath, your breath,
nurturing and softening any areas of tension or tightness you have in your body. I'm going to be quiet for around a minute as you rest, and the next sound you will hear will be my singing bowl. So if you are practicing yoga at home and you have a little bit more time, maybe you're able to stay in relaxation for a little longer, please do. Or maybe you gently begin to awaken, and that might take the form of some deeper breaths. Inhaling through your nose if that's possible, and you might like to sigh your breath out. Becoming aware of where you are in the room and space you are right now. And depending on how you are lying or resting in relaxation, maybe taking some time to slowly bring some movement to your body. So that might be gently moving your head and neck. Another option might be to begin to wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Small, gentle movements. Remembering that beautiful word ahimsa, which means compassion and kindness. So taking each movement with kindness towards yourself. Eventually finding your way up to a seated shape. If you can, use your hands to help you come to a sitting position. And that might be seated on your cushion, pillow again, maybe you come to a chair. And welcome to soften your gaze or close your eyes for a little longer. You may also like to bring your hands over your heart center. A way of thanking yourself for practicing yoga. A little gift of self-care for yourself. And if it felt good, noticing what has changed. Maybe you feel you've got a little bit more space in your body. Perhaps there's a little bit more space in your mind. Or maybe you can feel a little bit more space for your breath. And I'll finish our class together as I do with all my classes. And I bring my hands together at heart center in Anjali Mudra. I'm going to take my hands to my forehead for kind thoughts, to my lips for kind words, and to my heart centre for kind actions. Thank you for joining me for a little bit of yoga, and if you have any questions, please do get in touch.